my project is to look at that, and I'm doing 3 focus groups. The first one last week, this week, and another 2 weeks. If you know anyone who really would like to be involved, think they might like this at the end of it, let me know which 2 weeks we have room. There's a certain amount of dropout. We had thought we had 10 people today, so there's a certain amount of dropout. And then I'll write a paper, and it'll be my final project. Hopefully it'll lead to other research. You have coffee, you have bagels. I have, as promised, gift certificates for all of you to Amazon, so thank you very much for coming. I don't know how, maybe I mischecked, I don't know what it is, but it says happy birthday. You don't have to say happy birthday, as long as the code is there. And I figured rather than reprint them, I would be good environmentalist. A couple of you are green people, so I didn't want to do this again. I probably should have emailed you it, and that would have been even greener. So it's just an honest, frank discussion. If you disagree with each other, you know, I don't think it'll be fisticuffs. But I do think I really want some honest answers about trying to get to the bottom of what's happening. And hopefully it will lead to further research. So I can just start like this. I think would be a good way to do it, so we don't have to go out of it. Hot, it's got to leave at noon, so hopefully we'll get most of it. I will have that. So let's go to the first one. I want to know how closely you all are following the presidential primary campaign on social media. And I want to know why. Is it one time a day, several times a day, 2 times a week, weekly, even less frequently than that? And why? And how fascinating or not fascinating you might find it.
Yeah, for me, I would say I follow it more than a few times a day. It's probably has to do with the fact that I'm a sociologist. I'm also interested in politics, and currently the state of affairs in America and politics, how they're going here. Of course, I'm talking about Trump here, and yeah, that's got me interested. Here is a reality TV star. I wouldn't say star, but a billionaire who has managed to essentially hijack the political conversation in America without saying anything substantial about policy. Why that has occurred, it's interesting to see. Among my group of friends, he's a joke that has gone too far. And yeah, so it's interesting to see why this has happened. There are a lot of reasons why this has happened, probably because the creation of the Tea Party and how Republicans have lost control of their party, the conservatives. So for example, Jeb Bush with his 100 million couldn't do anything. Personally, for my social media, I am a very minimal user of Facebook, but I do use Twitter a lot. Not to tweet a lot of things, but to see what other people are tweeting. It's a lurkerish thing. I also use Imager, which provides me with a funny perspective on life. And funnily enough, I find that people on Imager, or Imager, I don't know, they are a lot more reasoned than even stuff that I would find online or in the newspapers, because the divide is so wide in traditional politics in America right now. But on a funny website with funny cat pictures and lasers and iced cheeseburgers, it just brings people together in a way.
The next, I will go into the specific sites a little later. Sure. And I'll ask you what percentage. Would you call yourself knowledgeable, somewhat knowledgeable, not very knowledgeable, don't give a damn?
About politics?
Yeah. Sounds like you're.
I would say 4 out of 5, 4.5.
Okay. All right. If you put the mics in between each of you, like you guys did, and you guys did, you won't have to move, I don't think, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you just, Carrie, if you direct it just a little bit towards you, it's fine. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Kerry Hayes, and I'm keeping very close watch of the presidential election. I usually watch the presidential election through conventional media. I sound off on Facebook every once in a while. I think it's very important that people become involved in the political process because it has a great impact on the nation. As you can see with the Trump campaign, he has moved the debate in a very disturbing way, and I think it's very critical that each person becomes involved in the political process.
How would you define yourself? In terms of knowledgeable, not very knowledgeable.
Very knowledgeable. Okay.
All right. So yeah, I guess starting off with your question, I'd say I probably characterize myself as knowledgeable, like probably, I would say fairly knowledgeable, but like, I don't know. And so yeah, I guess following the campaign in terms of social media, I kind of can't help but see it. I tend to like check Facebook, like, maybe in the morning, maybe in the evening, maybe like depending on what's going on, maybe more than that. And it's like everywhere. It's like the entire news feed right now. And I think that has a lot to do with people I associate with and people I'm connected to. It's like a diversity of opinion from like a rural part of Massachusetts. So there's certainly more than a little bit of like Trump support popping off on there. It's interesting to watch my two like spheres of friends kind of collide with one another in that way. A ton of like, so much Bernie Sanders stuff and so much like memeable Bernie Sanders stuff. It's like outrageous how much content is just like cranking out of this. I joined this one Facebook group, not because I'm terribly like into Bernie Sanders, but just because I'm wicked into all this content that's coming out around him, this Bernie Sanders dank meme stash. And I had to like leave the first day because it was the only content that was like happening on my Facebook thing. I think, yeah, and I don't know, in terms of, since we're like talking about Trump and that, I think it's sort of amazing in the way that like a tornado's amazing, and the conversation that I keep having with people on social media in real life is this question of like cause or symptom. Like, is he like dragging down American democracy, or is he like a symptom of like an underlying disorder? Is he the guy who figured out that like it's kind of a dog and pony show and like an empty spectacle a little bit, and like so he just plays it that way and it works because that's what it is. When it comes to traditional versus social media, I think when something happens, like when there's a caucus, when there's a primary, when there's something that involves like that kind of quantitative data, that's where I turn to like traditional media to find like what actually happened, like what are the facts of what happened here. And then I think it's back into kind of the social media feeds and like the blogosphere to find out, what everybody's take is on it and that.
How often you check your social media sites?
It depends on the day, right? On the weekends, if it's a lazy day, you know what I mean? I mean, with Facebook too, it's like it can be one sustained session, right? Where all of a sudden you sit down at 5 o'clock and you're like, what happened? The sun went down. What am I still doing? There's that. Yeah, I don't know, a couple, idle moments, right? Like I check social media the way that people used to use smoking, right? It's just kind of like an idle distraction.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nicholas?
To start again, like Sean did, I would say I'm knowledgeable. My primary use of social media is probably Facebook. And I would agree with Sean, the idea, at least within my network online, that most information about current election cycle is reactionary. It's reactionary comments. It's people who are reposting or commenting on a post, but it's not original content. And so where I drive a lot of my information is kind of that gray area between traditional media is I don't know. I mean, I guess apps and different forms of media is like a repackaging of traditional media, like the NY Times app. I mean, it's different in the way they package it, but I guess it's still traditional. I will say though that there's a huge, at least in my network, a big drop off in participation in this election compared to like 2012. With that last presidential election. In my network, I see every once in a while the Bernie stuff, but people talk about how Trump has really mastered this. And it's interesting coming from like a position where in my network, I don't really know any Trump supporters. And so all he really causes within my world is the occasional reactionary comment, but even that's died down over time because how many times are you gonna say he's ridiculous? I mean, it's assumed, I guess, in my
Doesn't surprise
network.
anybody anymore.
Yeah, exactly. His outrageousness isn't that outrageous anymore.
You should hear what he said today. Well, I think it's still outrageous. Yeah, it has changed, I think, the dynamic. I often think about, I have a 6-year-old, and she watches the Lego movie, and they talk about president business, and I sort of think about Trump, and I think about that. But it is like a reality TV show in some ways. It's true. It's interesting. Okay, and you said knowledgeable. How many times a day?
I probably check Facebook about once or twice a day.
Okay. All right, Andrew Morgan.
Yes, like kind of playing off what Nicholas said. I think there's it's interesting. There's a distinction between what you think of conventional media being kind of where action happens and where you kind of see that, and what Sean said, like quantifiable data. And there's, I mean, obviously a lot of overlap. Where social media tends to be more of like a reactionary field, and like you take things, and it's what's interesting to me is you have all these conventional media sources that use social media like integrated into their have integrated it into their way of doing business or spreading their messages. You can go directly to the New York Times, and then you can like post that onto your Facebook feed. So there's kind of like a direct linkage between the two worlds, and where one is just kind of like, well, this is how I feel about it after the fact. I think in that sense, there's really not a whole lot of like real information, so like concrete information coming out of like social media. And it's, it's just more of kind of like reaction. I would say I check my social media sites, mostly Facebook, and but I do like have certain apps that are, I guess that's where I'm kind of like confused, is because I have like apps that would be considered conventional media, and I check them regularly, but like in terms of social media, maybe 3 or 4 times a day, Facebook and Twitter a lot. So.
But you share the conventional media sites on your social media, is what you're
Occasionally, yeah. I tend to stay away from sharing political viewpoints on my Facebook page, just in general. I don't like using Facebook as like a sounding board. And I think most of my posts tend to be pretty like neutral, or I want to say bipartisan, because I really don't post a lot about politics. But I would say I'm somewhat knowledgeable about it, because politics plays in a lot of what I'm studying and what I'm interested in. But I don't feel the urge to like share and even comment. I don't like. I tend to unfollow people that share loudly their political viewpoints. And in that sense, the social media is kind of nice, because you have that control to not hear what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear, and you can hear more of what you are interested in. So
I think we've coined a new social media phrase: share loudly. I like that. Hashtag share loudly, or don't share loudly, or whatever it is. And how many times a day?
I said specifically social media, probably 3 to 4 times a day, just at different intervals.
Okay, it's as much as anyone else has done. Lydia?
So I think I've got a bit of an unusual perspective in that I consider myself generally quite knowledgeable about politics, but I'm not from America, so this is
really?
Surprisingly, I'm from New Zealand, so I would consider myself very knowledgeable about New Zealand politics. And I guess given America's role in the world, you can't ignore American politics from the outside. So I guess the last 2 presidential elections I've been generally following, but this is the first time I've ever been in the country at the time that an election is happening. I've only been here 5 months, so I'm still quite fresh, and it's still it's interesting to me trying to kind of gauge on the ground as it is meeting local Americans and hearing their perspectives on politics.
And a non-voter, right?
I'm a non-voter.
Yeah,
so. I have opinions, but they're irrelevant.
Well, they're not irrelevant for the purpose of this group, and we'd love to hear
Sure,
hear them. How often do you follow? You consider yourself pretty knowledgeable. How often do you follow?
So I reserve my kind of knowledgeability on I'm actually not sure. I'm still kind of trying to figure out American politics as I'm witnessing this spectacle of it. I'm currently detoxing from social media because I check it quite frequently when I'm when I procrastinate. So
is this a 28-day program, or what is it?
something like that, yeah. So at the moment, the only social media I'm using is Snapchat, which actually has it is covering the primaries, so that's interesting.
But it disappears. It's self-destruct, isn't it?
Yeah. But there's so Snapchat you can do user to user, but there's also public. So someone is controlling some. It's anonymous. You're not sure who is releasing the short little videos that you're getting, you know, it's coming from Snapchat, but they're covering, you know, for example, Nevada, and they're covering South Carolina. So you can watch sort of like minute-long videos of like, you know, 3 or 4 second clips of like local voters being like, yeah, Trump, or like, I don't know.
Is it a metaphor for the campaign itself, I wonder?
Like,
you know?
what, reductionist,
Well,
kind
and
of
then it
low
just sort of
yeah,
disappears and it's
yeah,
ephemeral.
it's
you know?
this, what is this kind of thing, yeah. Before that, I guess I was using Twitter quite a lot. I'm similar, I lurk, I follow, and I don't necessarily put my own content. I don't share my own views generally. Yeah, Facebook, I guess I also use occasionally, but mainly in the, like, I'll see what events are happening. Particularly, I've been quite interested around, like, I guess the Bernie bro phenomenon of, like, I would say that the equivalent person, a young person in New Zealand, wouldn't be necessarily as engaged in someone like Bernie Sanders. So it's interesting to me to see that like young, mainly white people are kind of getting this meme like following around an old white guy who, you know, is like touting socialism, which is unheard of in this country. You know, there's a whole lot of things that are interesting about Bernie, but I'm particularly interested in the way he's like generated this support level in people who I would otherwise consider probably likely to be apathetic about politics.
How are you getting your news then?
How am I getting
How
my
long
news?
have you been on the wagon of social media, and how, you know,
So
on
I've
the wagon?
been off the wagon for, I don't know, like
No, on the
two-
wagon, I think. It's on the wagon. You're on the
Oh,
wagon.
yeah.
If you fall off the wagon, then you're
Right,
back
yeah,
in.
so I've had like, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks where I haven't checked social media.
Oh, the first week's the hardest, so. Congratulations.
I do this from time to time just as a like, I need to not think about everyone else's thoughts for a while. But then I still end up checking like conventional media sites and still, you know, I'm a political junkie. I still get my political news one way or the other.
Right, so it's sort of like having non-alcoholic beer by going to
Yeah,
the right
basically.
time. Okay, move on to Vincent.
Hi, Vincent Dorada, and I do use Facebook once or twice a day. Mostly I get incoming from from other people. I get about Bernie Sanders, like you said, and what I don't get is anything on Hillary, and I haven't heard anybody mention Hillary since the beginning here. And the thing is, she has a proven track record. I mean, she was Secretary of State, she was a senator, she was here, do the whole thing with 9/11 and everything. And everybody's focusing on Trump, this spectacle. I heard it 2 or 3 times. Somebody said spectacle, spectacle, spectacle. Humans and the site are spectacles. Since carnivals, since sleight of hand, since Arnold Schwarzenegger became governor, since Ronald Reagan became president. So it's all a media. And he's
Jesse Ventura.
Excuse me?
Jesse Ventura,
Yeah, Jesse Ventura up in Michigan. He passed though.
Minnesota.
Minnesota, yeah, it was one of those up there. And he literally almost bankrupted the state. So Americans and children, and even children growing up, have the cartoons, they're always looking, listening. I think it's a saturated media, and it's targeted at certain people. And even the information we get here in New York is not the same information that these people are giving to other states. So we are seeing what they want us to see. I'm sorry.
Not a reaction to what you're saying. No.
And it is,
Figure this out.
And it is directed at certain groups, and it's spawned in social media, which I don't check that much except for the Facebook. But I do subscribe to the campaigns and to the debates, and so I do get personal emails about what is going on.
And when you say you don't hear much about Hillary Clinton, you subscribe to her
Oh yeah,
team,
of course.
so you
I
get
do.
that from on Facebook.
Yeah,
But
sure.
you don't get other people talking about her.
Right, I haven't seen, even it's played down. It's not played as exciting as you see, as even the way they're playing her as this, you know, firm, the way her campaign is being led, and the way Trump is just saying it and going with the energy like that. I think it's 2 totally different things. And when you say knowledgeable, who's going to win or what the politics are, I don't know, and what the way the media is going with it. So it's really difficult to see that no one's even getting excited about Ms. Clinton,
The people who are getting the excitement are,
her followers.
no, but the people getting excited, the candidates who are getting the most excitement, you think, are Trump and Bernie?
Yeah. Everything seems to be leading that way. Everybody's, even in the conversation here.
Yeah, well, it's an easy target, Trump. Rebecca, let's ask you, how many times you follow it, if at all, and how knowledgeable are you?
Well, if I were honest with myself, I think I probably check my social media at least 5 times a day. And Facebook, Twitter, not so much via my own following, but I do see it a lot on websites that I check. And then I get emails a lot from Bernie, from Hillary, from like Emily's List, which is like more woman, like, you know what Emily's List is. But I do kind of get updates a lot there. As far as social media, Facebook, I'm from a really conservative town, so a lot of high school friends are posting about Donald Trump, or like older parents' friends are posting about Donald Trump. I have a pretty equal divide between people posting that I follow about Bernie and Hillary, but probably more towards the Bernie side. And I would say most of my news either comes from Facebook or just like NPR in the morning, and the Times or
Online?
online, yeah, right.
Anybody subscribe to a newspaper?
I use somebody else's subscription to access.
I don't want to hear about that. I'm a stockholder in the Times. I don't want to hear about it. All right, so you did, to access the online.
App.
Okay, right, but no one subscribes to the newspaper, right? How many
Just
people?
the app.
Just the app, right, but no one subscribes to the
To actual.
sit on the toilet and read the newspaper kind of thing, right? No.
What a waste of paper, Bill.
News magazine.
Well, it depends on how you use it after you read it.
It's a weird focus group we're getting into. Did anyone grow up with a family subscribed to the newspaper? How many? Raise your hands. So everyone here grew up as 8 people. Everyone, you're saying, you had at home, your parents or whoever you had raising you, there was a newspaper in the morning.
Yeah.
And how many people get a newspaper every morning here? No one. Interesting. That's why newspapers are in such trouble. I am going to go a little bit out of format because I want to get Ahad in here, and it's now 11:30, and he's got to leave at 12. So you're going to get a sneak preview of the rest of the questions, but I want to get your answers because I don't want to miss anybody. And 8 people takes a little longer, and I tend to blab on. So I'm going to just sort of rat-tat-too it here and get at you. You said that you had Facebook and Twitter. What percentage of each of them? What do you use more for your work?
Well, in terms of posting stuff, it's probably, I don't post a lot of stuff at all. I must have posted like 1 tweet in the last year.
That's not much at all, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty minuscule compared to the addictions of very many of my friends. I would say I use Facebook to find out what my friends are up to, really. That's all I use Facebook for. Twitter I use for political news. I subscribe to, I follow a lot of those websites. It was interesting what I think Sean said, where traditional and social media are bleeding into each other. And actually, one of the ways of traditional media has sort of is trying to incorporate social media into their business model. This happened to The Independent, for example, the newspaper in England, which completely stopped printing its print edition just 2 weeks ago, and it's a pretty big institution, The Independent in the UK, and they've just gone to a completely online model now.
Because you're not subscribing to it.
That's one of the
It
things.
was Andrew who said that.
Yes.
So, but anyway, that's the reason. So you subscribe to that, you monitor that website online, is that what you're saying?
Yes, I do monitor that website. Actually, on the basis of that, there's an interesting thing that I wanted to say. That it's the idea of social media itself. What we find is it's a very segregated space, the virtual social world. I think a lot of people will here agree that we have a fixed number of websites that we go to. So we would go to the New York Times, we'll go to websites that pertain to our view of politics, our spectrum of politics, but we would not go to the other side. So I don't know how many people watch Fox News, but I would doubt the number is pretty low. So one of the, and a couple of sociologists have also looked at this, but a lot of online users seem to group together in terms of their views and ideologies in cyberspace. And what it's doing is essentially self-radicalizing. So if someone here says something that I agree with, I'm like, yeah, that person's saying I'm right. And when these groups coagulate, they just become even stronger. It sort of reminds me of the partisanship that exists in America as well. So it's one of those things. And also social media for me is not serious political work. A lot of college students for sure think if they have tweeted something or shared loudly, they have done their political duty. 30 years ago, no one would think, they would have to be on the streets. Now it's pretty easy for you to describe yourself as politically active.
So you think this, for many people, this takes the place, or they think it takes the
It is
place?
beginning, yes. For many young students, for many young college kids, this is what's taking place.
For the politicians themselves that you may see on Twitter or Facebook, and you say you keep up with them on the social media, they're using it as an adjunct to their political campaign, or a political organizer would use that to get the word out.
Yeah.
They're not, for true political organizers, they're not using it as a substitute, but rather a boost to what they're doing, right? Or do you disagree?
I think they're using, I would say they're using it for both purposes. For example, Trump is the perfect social media candidate in my view. He says things that are snappy right there, boom, punch, I'm gonna punch that guy, or throw that guy out, or, someone's a loser. So these are these micro clips. He's a reality star person, so he knows that America has been drip-fed a stream of reality TV over the last 15 years. Keeping up with the Kardashians is huge in America, and Trump sort of understands that. So he's very on topic. One of the biggest complaints that other candidates, for example, had was Trump gets all the media hype. That's why he's in the news, because everyone's just focused on him. He's very in tune with his image on social media.
Is that why he's winning?
No, that's not why he's winning particularly, but this is helping him a lot, because why he's winning has to do with deeper political reasons, in my opinion, which is to do with the Republican Party and just the general state of politics in America.
Do you get your political news differently than you might the daily news that you would get? In other words, would you go to a news media site for the daily news and wait to see the news media site on social media for politics? I mean, is there a
Actually,
difference?
I do go to news media websites first, and Twitter is just a way of reinforcing that or getting some additional information. Yes, and even for funsies, I watch Fox News sometimes because Bill O'Reilly can be stupidly entertaining. And I'll be pretty honest, when I was younger, I would watch him because he would, teach us a word every day at the end of the spin zone. And there you go. And in fact, that's one of the things. So that's why I wanted to say that social media is very radicalized. You have what is called keyboard warriors. So if you look at any comment section online, they'd be filled with the most ridiculous things for anyone from their perspective. There's that. Yeah.
You don't read newspapers, the hard copies, but do you watch television news besides Fox News every once in a while for entertainment?
Well, less now. But before I entered my grad school, I did watch it, just for like big events, not generally.
Is there a difference in the coverage, the qualitative nature of the coverage of social media versus more traditional media?
There used to be, but in my opinion, it's dumbing down. I think because social media is becoming a part of business models. Traditional media used to be thought of as maybe 10 years ago, it used to be thought of as the authoritative, more solid, serious journalism. But the fact that, but because of social media's integration into traditional models of journalism, it's becoming, I think the information is getting diluted. If you would say maybe 10 years ago, who would you trust? Would you trust BuzzFeed or CNN? 10 years ago, people might say CNN. Today, I don't know. I don't think so. I think that it would be a pretty close call.
BuzzFeed had a great news app.
There you go.
And it's
that
got a lot of
sums it up.
criticism as well, but yes, it's certainly got more trust than it used to have. Is there a difference, do you think, between what you see online coming from a campaign versus what you see from a more traditional news site that is now on the web?
Yes, of course. It probably has to do with the fact that I go to like a bunch of websites. So I would go to the New York Times, but I will also check Fox News, and then just to see what the other side is saying, and then look at what the campaign said. So it's this different intersections of things. I actually have a small amount of experience in media, so I know how things can be spun in certain ways. And one of the things that I would tell people is, if you want to get the news, either watch Jon Stewart or watch all of the channels, because each channel today in America would give you their perspective of the news. It's very subjective.
I want to talk a little bit about negative campaigning. These are all questions you guys can think about because you'll get the same question. Negative campaigning, do you know what it is?
You mean attack ads?
Yeah, attack ads and whatnot. There are plenty of studies with conventional media that show that negative campaigning and negative ads can be very effective in influencing prospective voters. So I want to talk about negative ads. There's no negative campaigning on the web. Have you seen any kind of angry tweets, attack tweets, angry posts? And what's your reaction when you see it? And if you can remember what it was when you used to watch television news, or you still do, but when you used to read newspapers, you see an attack ad or television. Does it affect how you view that candidate?
Well, I already have my perceived notions of candidates, and of course they may evolve with what I'm reading, but and attack ads, maybe a few years ago, they would have been an entity of their own, but I don't think they stand on their own legs now, because you have, as you said, their blogs, so it's part of the strategy, really. The attack ads don't stand by themselves. They stand by these bloggers who will write this stuff. They will stand by these posts and these deliberate tweets that will be tweeted out. For me, they don't influence me because I try and get as much news as possible from a variety of sources, and then see what my brain tells me, and that's what I believe, really. But yeah, it's a concerted effort, really. The ads, the blogs. So, for example, Ted Cruz in where was this? Ted Cruz is using a data mining firm for his election campaign. So for example, when his ground troops go to houses to tell people, hey, whoa, they know to the extent what sort of person will open the door, what sort of greeting, each individual greeting was tailored related to the voter that they were going to go. That's the dangerous, Novian amount of information they had about the voters they were going to target. So attack ads, they're just the bleeding down of that. They don't stand by themselves, they're negative, and in a way they work today more than maybe in previous years, because the gloves are off this year. You can say, Trump can say anything and get away with it.
Except when you have a negative ad, you have the ability for other people to post and react to that. If it's just a negative ad on television, you don't have that response.
Yeah.
There's not that social media response. Is it effective to you at all? You've already made up your mind, so it doesn't really affect you, you're saying?
Personally, it doesn't, but even if it's on the if it's on the telly, I mean, people will still tweet about it, hey, and even if it can't be just on television anymore, it'll always be on YouTube, and there'll be a link to that and a comment.
We talked about sharing loudly, but regular sharing, do you read people who share stuff? Does it affect you? Do you distrust it when you see it, rather than coming from the original source? Does it affect your view of the person who shared it?
No, I don't think it affects my view of the person who shared it, because that this person may have a different, even if a Trump voter, and I have maybe 2 friends who are Trump voters, even if they would share it, I would sort of understand that there's I would logically maybe argue with them, but then I would realize logic doesn't really play into it. These are our very primitive beliefs, you know. And yeah, and really debating online is one of the most futile things you will ever do. Please don't waste your time in an online conversation.
Do you ignore it, Kristen? Ignore a share? Is it by a friend? Is it a close friend of yours? Word close bud?
But it depends on the amount of reading and work that I have to do. So if it's about Trump or if it's about Hillary, for example, who no one talks about because she's very unspectacularly solid, maybe in a way. Yeah, I would ignore it because of time constraints, not because I don't want to read it.
I'm going to write that down. It's unspectacularly solid. In an era where using spectacular rules, that's interesting. And finally, any other thing you would want to say that you thought you'd say that I didn't ask yet?
No, really. I think there was actually this. I was in a talk a couple of days ago, and it was said. So this is generally just about the idea of politics, but what was said was the idea that the left has lost energy. So it was interesting, but we were talking about Hillary and Trump supporters, for example, seem to be very charged. You know, there seems to be this momentum which if you were neutral would say is Obama-esque in their voters. And what's interesting is most of these voters are going to be voters who are intermittent voters. So a lot of Trump voters are ones who last time voted in like 20 years ago or 30 years ago. That's what's coming out. So these voters are like completely upending the order there is, and the left seems to have no real energy. There is the feel the burn, sure, but
Well, people are giving money to Bernie, and not giving money to Trump. People money to Trump is they tend to get some more emotional investment. Thank you for the speed dating thing here. You can leave or stay, whatever, but I wanted to
I
make sure
got
you
15 minutes.
Okay, good. So hang around. Carolyn, I'm gonna start asking you. We'll go around the table in the morning, right? But I want to make sure. Huh? Oh, absolutely, yes. Where were we when we started with you? You talked about the sites you had off. People sound off on Facebook. You don't very rarely get involved in that stuff, right?
In what?
You're sounding off on Facebook.
I do sound on Facebook every once in a while, maybe like once or twice a month.
And what do you do? How do you do that? What things do you subscribe to? What candidates do you follow? And what conventional media do you follow on that site?
I follow all the candidates. I watch conventional media. I watch Fox Channel 5. I watch NBC, MSNBC, and CNN. And but I tend to get most of my news from The Economist, most of my political news about the country from The Economist, because I feel that they have more of a neutral approach to American politics. So I subscribe to The Economist. I also look at the New York Times.
When you say look at it, subscribe to, you're talking about online, right?
Online.
Okay.
Online.
And do you ever follow them? Do other people follow them? Do you get to read that from other posts that are shared?
I won't read it from other posts that are shared. I will read it, but I won't trust it. I tend to not trust things that are on the internet. Yes.
You tend to not trust it,
I tend to not trust it.
even if it comes from a traditional media site.
If it comes from a traditional media site, I tend to trust it more. But if it comes from non-traditional media site, I tend to be skeptical.
And why is that? Why would you trust that more?
Because people can put anything on the internet at any time. And I just don't believe that people are always honest when they put something on the internet. I believe that the internet allows people to post anything that, stuff that doesn't make sense or stuff that will mislead people.
So do you subscribe to the candidates' websites, or?
No, I don't subscribe to the candidates' websites.
Yes, so you don't get any tweets from the candidates, you
I
don't get any
tweets.
direct information from the campaign or
No,
candidates?
I won't get any information.
Would you not trust that? Why would you get that?
I just don't get it because I haven't subscribed subscribe to it. I wouldn't trust it because it's coming from the candidate, so they're going to try to spin it in a way where they will get your vote.
You are following the presidential campaign, and do you find it more compelling than, let's say, the Daily News, the fire in the Bronx, and the man who stabs the kid in Staten Island, whatever?
I will watch local news, but I will get my local news from like New York 1 or Brooklyn 12. But I do find politics more interesting, more compelling.
Sean, you talked about on your Facebook, Sanders is the only content, and it just sort of goes.
It just fills it up. Yeah.
So, what do you find this more compelling, the presidential news and information versus, let's say the regular local news, or do you like local news as well?
I don't know.
Or not local, but other
Right.
non-campaign.
I feel like when I watch like the 24-hour cable stuff, it's like I can't do it. I just like can't sit and watch it. I feel like they're trying to fill 24 hours of news with like 3 hours of content. You know what I mean? I feel like you just get the same points, like reiterated, rehashed again and again and again. It's like the Clash album Sandinista, which is like 4 discs, and it's like 2 discs of material. It's just like, I don't know, I can't do it. What was the rest of the question? Sorry.
You find this more compelling versus regular news? Are you more into the presidential campaign because of that?
I don't know. I mean, I think I'm always interested in election year. I think this election cycle is like more interesting than normal for like a lot of reasons. I think, yeah, in terms of the content that's like, and like this clashing content that I'm seeing on my feed, I think that stuff is a lot more interesting. I taught high school for a couple of years, so a lot of the people on my feed are people who are now like an undergraduate, you know what I mean, like in their like early 20s. And so I'm kind of getting plugged into like a whole other kind of dialogue than I would usually get. I think that's sort of interesting.
Would it have been less interesting presidential campaign if Donald Trump hadn't been here? Would we be saying the Republican campaign is so boring?
No,
Trump had not been there?
I think part of what you're looking at, part of the reason for Trump is you've got like, what is it, like 17 people in that race, right? I mean, Trump is polling a steady, like 23%, like a rock solid, like, and those people
Yeah,
are
45% last night in Nevada.
Was that? Well, that's bananas. That's totally nuts. But here's what I think. I think if you had like in your establishment lane or whatever, right? Like 2 guys and then Trump doesn't make it. I think when you're splitting that, like, I say reasonable, but that more reasonable Republican electorate, right? Between like these 7 guys and Donald Trump, yeah. I think Rubio or Cruz or somebody's going to have to get out of the race before Trump locks it down. But I don't know.
Yeah, but by the time, wouldn't be, is it in danger right now? By the time they get out?
That's exactly the question, right? That's
Maybe
I think they're already saying that it's too late for that.
Here's what I'm hoping.
It's already kind of down to a 3-horse
When
race.
the time for the transcriber? Go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, my sense is that it's already down to a 3-horse race. I mean,
Yeah.
Jeb Bush is out, Carson is a no-show.
Yeah.
Like,
There's
it's a 3-horse race, and neither Cruz nor Rubio are going to like just willingly drop out. So there's like people are calling it that it's Trump
so
from the back.
excited for a deadlocked convention because they don't have the superdelegate thing. So you could totally have that kind of situation where it drags out like 3-4 ballots. They're like drafting people who were never in the primaries. Like that is what a thrill.
I want to keep it on social media because I love this discussion, but my project is on social media. So let's talk, Andrew, Nicholas. Let's talk to you about which one you use. Let me look at your. You have mostly on Facebook. Most of your news on Facebook and NPR and the New York Times, which are 3 very different things, but certainly Facebook different than the New York Times and the NPR. Do you keep them up? You heard some of the questions I asked Ahad and other people. Do you trust them more? What do you trust? You are a New York Times, so considered the best.
Well, I don't trust New York Times.
You don't, but you read it.
Not all the times. I mean, I think one thing about being in school and right now I'm pursuing a master's is the development of critical thought. Critical thought requires multiple sources and then a critical thought about the sources coming from. Therefore, like social media more as a reactionary or commentary or a source for people in my network to talk about things. But that doesn't mean that I go and disregard what somebody says, a friend of mine, and automatically trust what the New York Times writer would say about something.
One's a trained journalist, though, right?
Correct, but there is no such thing as non-bias in media, even from the selection of what you choose to publish. So everything comes with some form of programming behind it, or some form of agenda. But I do respect like the trained journalism aspect of covering a story, the investigation and stuff like that, that a lot of print media is
I gotta
lost.
stop with trained journalism, because journalism is up to the individual. You can have all the tools in the world, journalism's up to the individual. I count 6 to 10 every day when I watch the news, and I call them and I write the FCC about how much they have wrong. It's the individual. You can't say, he's a journalist.
Well, it's also the editor that chooses to publish a certain journalist, and also, or air them, or whatever. So I guess that person who can
But when a
they can have like misinformation, they have social media as an outlet to propagate that. But there is ethics in traditional media.
It's usually unenforceable ethics. And even if you go to the FCC with a valid complaint, they can address the complaint, make the correction on air, and it's over. There is no...
There is market enforcement of ethics.
I think what's interesting.
Subscriptions, but I think we're getting off topic. Like,
No, but it's interesting because it does deal with trust.
Sure.
But is there any kind of trained Facebook blogger or trained tweeter?
I think
Go
this is a particular aspect of politics and social media age, is that because you're exposed to so many more sources, like the public in general are more inclined to question or to like distrust or to have this kind of skepticism, which like is probably a good thing, but I would say it's happening at a rate that maybe hasn't happened before, you know, like people presumably, I don't know, a few decades ago could have just said like, I get my news from the New York Times, and that would be a respectable thing to say. Whereas now, if someone said they only get their news from one site, that would be a thing that you wouldn't trust them on.
well, they say that with the increase of information and voices, there's a scarcity of attention.
Yeah.
So
Right, and so
it
do we
becomes
have
a big issue about like what this is raising, about trusting, about like being correct, being truthful, and being honest is a lot more difficult, I think, in today's, because people will take anything that, for me, it's almost like it's too new still, that the idea that an average person that is untrained and doesn't work under ethics can publish something, and just the act that it's published gives it still a sense of being official in some way, or to be more serious perhaps, and in time maybe that will diminish. But, because I also think about one thing that you haven't asked about is the official accounts of traditional media sources in the realm of social media, because like New York Times has 11 million likes on their Facebook page. What is their role then in social media when you have that much, 11 million likes, they post something and they're guaranteed a few million views within 30 seconds.
But journalism, publishing and broadcasting, not journalism, the journalism that is done through broadcasting and publishing is not just a question of number of likes, because that doesn't translate necessarily into money. And when the New York Times sold 1.5 million copies of its paper every day, that translated into subscriber fees. Money. The stock price went up. They could pay the reporters. They could hire better reporters because they could pay more. And they did hire the best reporters in the world.
But could they operate without pursuing a social media agenda?
You can't now. And 11 million likes, they have an incredible website. They tried to mirror the paper there. But it is not producing the kind of revenue that would begin to take the place of what happened, because none of you 8 subscribe to the New York Times. I still do, just because I come from newspapers, so I would not want to do that. But most people are not doing that, and they have not figured out how to make money on that. So, but you have a different view of the New York Times. You don't trust it, you say, because you're.
Well, there are certainly certain journalists that I based on having a long-term relationship with them over 25 years or so of following certain writers, I know of ones that I feel are trustworthy.
And many of them have taken buyouts because they can't afford to be paid anymore.
But you're also saying that it's a problem that the New York Times is not making as much money. There's also the argument that it's the breakup of media monopoly, that you can go to The Intercept. You can go to other forums online of reputable journalism, ProPublica, other places. And so there's more voices, but you have to search them.
Leads to the question then, and the logical question I think is, on a different part of the debate, we have more information, but do we know more? Are we more knowledgeable? Do you think that you're more knowledgeable, Andrew, than you would have been 10 years ago because of social media? Thank you very much, Alan. Oh, wait. Happy birthday.
I don't know if I'd say I'm more or less knowledgeable, but you brought up an interesting distinction that people got started on social media because it was this really fun thing to do that was free. You know, so everybody was involved everybody had a Facebook page because you could go on and explore, and, you know, at its origin, it wasn't, you know, the sort of news feed that you have now, but everybody entered it, and especially with Twitter too, because it was free. And so now, like you said, the struggle is these media sources that were operating, you know, are having to compete for attention with the social media realm, and are trying to find ways to monetize that, because I feel like they feel obligated to play, because that's where everybody's looking now. It's is on the internet, on their phones. So if you don't have a way to like penetrate that mode of your viewers' attention, then you're gonna fail. But I think that's interesting in the sense that, like, I think people are, you know, on their phones and on social media sites, and they enjoy it because it's free. But, you know, as soon as you get like the New York Times coming in and saying like, hey, we'll let you see your news on your phone too, but we want to charge you for it, I think that's where you lose people's interest. And so maybe they like the New York Times and they'll get like those postings every once in a while on their Facebook feed, but they're not actually getting, I think, the real New York Times, not getting the content that they want you to pay for. So so it's really easy, especially on social media, I think, to distrust anything because it's free. I mean, yeah.
Rebecca, I want to go to you for a second. You check 5 times a day on your Facebook. You get emails from Hillary Rodham Clinton and from Bernie Sanders.
I get my emails from Emily's List.
And from Emily's List, right? I have the Emily's List. Do you trust them as much as you would a news source on the web, or let's say your friend sharing stuff?
I think trust is an interesting concept here, because what does trust mean? Like, do I trust that that's the policy that this candidate believes in, or do I trust that I should, you know, vote for them because they're promoting them? Like, I think a lot of politics on social media is like, which person do you like more, and not really what the issues that they're discussing are. And like, what do I trust? If they're talking about a specific issue, then I'm gonna go with kind of more of the issue. Maybe I should be more specific here, but like someone brought up the Bernie socialism, like it is kind of something that's magical that's happening, and I think most people are liking Bernie as a person because he's really pushed in social media as kind of like the cool candidate. Hillary's kind of brushed under as being uncool, unrelatable to our generation especially. And as far as another thing with Hillary is, I feel like there's kind of a shadow of all the news about her emails and her personal email being used. I feel like it's unintentionally, or maybe intentionally, like Bernie's side is kind of like showing that. And for me, it makes me not trust her as a candidate as much.
I gotta just interject.
Just from the news I've heard.
Right. On the email question.
Sorry.
On the email.
But the
Right.
proof has already been out for Hillary that she did it. She disclosed all the information. Nothing was illegal. Nothing was compromising. It was a ploy to get people to think, oh, and who here doesn't use their phone for something else? And to say that Hillary's phone isn't a safe line, although it's personal, while she's a senator or a secretary of state, is crazy.
So is this a negative campaign ad? Is this kind of a negative campaign ad, what's happening with the Clinton?
It's
email?
negative.
I think
It's a negative thing, but I do not believe it for a second.
Okay, but it is, if she's using her personal, like Yahoo.com or AOL email, it means she's out of touch. Like, why can't she have 2 emails, a work email and a personal email on her phone?
No, she's using it, but she was getting everything from work to that email account. That was the issue.
It was linked.
Well, yeah, she was saying, you know, they say, okay, Rebecca, we have your email address, and that, if you were Secretary of State, you say, use my Gmail account, and that's what she was doing.
Right,
It was on her server, not a server that goes through the State Department.
So,
That's what I mean.
That was not the first time.
Not the first time. Right. And so has that been like a negative campaign ad? This may be the biggest negative campaign ad that's been there. So if it is.
I'm a student of history. A negative campaign ad is Adam saying to Andrew Jackson that your mother's a prostitute, or your wife is a common whore. That's the negative campaign ad in my mind. To go back to your point about are you more knowledgeable with more sources? If critical thought is applied. And that's my concern, that people have a bunch of sources, but critical thought is not applied.
So is that a problem, Sean?
No, well, I wanted to talk about, there was one thing that's on my mind, which is, just in terms of like personal affinity for the candidate, I think that's true. I think it also has to do with your worldview and with your view of the candidate's worldview. Like, I think in terms of people on my feed, I definitely had, there's some people that are support for Hillary Clinton. It tends to be sort of your like more traditional liberals who have a view that like the system doesn't work like it should, and like we're failing people, and like it needs to be repaired. And then I've got this whole other, I think, portion of people that I'm friends with in social media who have a view that the system is either irreparably broken or worse, like functions exactly as designed. And those people tend to break in like one of 2 ways, and they tend to break either Bernie or Trump, right? Like the people who are like really alienated, who are like have like no grounding in politics whatsoever, tend to break Trump. And the people who are like used to like vote Democrat, or like I have a bunch of friends who, you know, when I was like, I did a little organizing for the Democratic Party, and you know, I got radicalized, and some of those people got radicalized. I see those people kind of like drifting back, right? Like drifting back into that orbit. I think again, because so it's not just that like they like Bernie. I think there's a view that there's like an authenticity there, but I think it's also that like they see a worldview they respect.
And how does that come across in terms of social media? How does that play into it for you?
Right.
Anybody else want to weigh in on that
Yeah.
while Sean thinks about that?
Yeah.
You know, this whole sort of fervor for Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, how does social media, how is that being used to help foment that? Donald Trump has spent $13 million on his campaign. He's worth $4 billion.
it's the memeability of what he's doing.
The what?
And- Sorry.
The meme ability?
Memeability, or the memification, or, you know, like that a simple little statement like someone's a loser somehow can, like, I don't know, you chuck that on a cat picture, or like, you know, you kind of like combine it with the traditional, I say traditional, and the internet norms are still a relatively new thing, but you combine, I don't know, I'm seeing Bernie is Bae, BAE, which is like, I don't know, a new internet term for like your significant other, that Bernie has somehow like tapped into a new wave of young people's engagement with media, both traditional and old.
74-year-old doing that,
Yeah.
right? So does that,
Yeah,
age
but,
doesn't matter?
My understanding of Bernie is that he kind of injected some energy that, you know, didn't exist at all in the American left, and then the people who latched onto him suddenly worked out that in order to really make anything of that, the social media strategy had to come. So I feel like his ideology came first, or his like fresh thinking, or like that he was sort of anti-system, was the original part of his successful campaign so far, if you could call it successful. And then, I mean, like, yeah, he's a 74-year-old guy. I think he's got a good team of incredibly like smart social media strategists. I don't know that he is the one particularly leading the charge. And I think it probably comes out of a lot of people feeling they didn't want a stale candidate like Clinton just kind of walking in super easily to that role.
Are you better informed, do you think, you're off Facebook right now for 2 or 3 weeks, but are you better informed than you were before before social media?
I see Facebook as like often being quite linked to political information. You know, I have a whole lot of activist friends who like they do their primary organizing through Facebook. They organize their campaigns, they organize their events through Facebook.
Yeah.
I would say that Facebook is like has like a large causal relationship between people's political engagement and their information.
I think that's all it is.
Without social media, I think the primary would be over. I think Sanders would be done without social media, because his target audience are all the people that use social media, the young college campus students. And without social media, I think the primary would be over.
Whether it's necessarily like information and knowledge that's being shared, I think is debatable. But at least, like a lot of people probably are more informed about Sanders because they first heard about him on, you know, some meme on Facebook.
Right.
You know, like there's the relationship between like where you hear about something first and then where you go and learn about it.
Well, I think like one of the major things about social media is that it allows politicians, it's not about taking an ad out, which is one directional, it's about boosting public debate. That you do something on social media in order to create interaction. Whether it's just hitting a like button or retweeting or resharing or commenting, it's interactive participation in a process of ideas. Whereas taking out an op-ed in the New York Times 15 years ago or having television commercials is very one-directional. And then the debate happens within your family and friends in person or via emails or whatever at that time. But now it happens real time. And it also leads to traditional news sources covering certain ideas that something can explode on social media. I mean, how many questions in some of these primaries are based off of what Donald Trump tweeted? Yeah. And that itself becomes a news story. It is about what happened in social media.
And I think that's an important consideration too, is which of these candidates are actually using social media themselves, and which of them just have like a team of social media experts writing their posts for them.
Do you think about that when you see their posts?
Absolutely. And you kind of have this idea that Donald Trump is actually watching the Democratic debate and like on his phone tweeting after things he says, but I don't know.
There was that great Saturday Night Live where he was off script. Do you remember that? He was off camera and he was tweeting with little tweets above what he thought of the skit.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And that was the best skit he had. He wasn't that good on the other stuff, but that was very funny. He was reacting to it. So you feel when you see this that you think about whether some staffer is doing it,
right,
or whether the candidate himself or herself is doing it.
And there's no doubt in my mind that Bernie Sanders is not using it, but I can see where Donald Trump might be, because he's a celebrity, and like I believe that celebrities are more inclined to I think use it themselves just because they have like that direct connection.
Which raises the question I raised earlier, and I sort of got a semi-poo-pooed. Would Donald Trump be as popular right now and be doing so well if it weren't for social media?
No.
If he's a social media candidate?
I think this election is so social media driven because it's entertaining. And social media, people go to social media like they're waiting for something or they're bored. It's entertainment. So the social media aspect is purely for entertainment reasons, not purely, but if people want to get hardcore like facts of views of how these politicians actually view the policy, I think they go more towards traditional news sources.
Vincent, you said earlier that you sort of took issue about the trained journalists. Do you miss those days that you grew up with?
Well, yeah, actually, yeah, and especially because of the new technology, the web, and everything else, photographers for most of the big papers are gone. They get the free from a whole profession has been erased. And now, even with the NFL, all those guys on the sideline, they have the new 360-degree computer camera. They're not going to need cameramen anymore. They're not going to need journalists. They just spoke today about on social media and everything, but the fact is, every $10 to $20 job in America is going to be replaced by a machine. So what's going to happen over the next 10 to 20 years in that direction, even with the food, our food chains and the supplies. It's being spread. Seeds are being planted to go into the future, and it's just losing its content.
Bernie Sanders would say that the problem is that we have too many $10 and $20 an hour jobs. That's the problem, and that people aren't. There's no more middle class. I want to go back to some of the social media questions again. Angry posts, does that help, hurt? We talked a little bit with the negative ads. Does that affect you guys?
Yeah, I think it hurts definitely, because
Hurts what?
Today it hurts the reputation of the person, or it tries to. Some people will back Hillary
Sorry,
against this.
the person who is the target, or the person?
Target, yes, of
Okay.
course. Oh, always a target, because if it'll click off in maybe 1 out of 10 person's mind. They're throwing switches of what people will tolerate. And these are all statistics. So they get statistics from, what people will tolerate, what people won't tolerate. So they're going to attack her on this, on her phone. How many people here have children with problems with the phone and using the phone and giving the wrong information? It's going to click somebody's mind. But as we proved here, 2 or 3 people didn't even know how it was done and what was done with the information, and how she did absolutely nothing wrong. They still have in their minds at this table that Hillary did something irreparably wrong, and she did nothing.
So if Donald Trump, go ahead.
I think it sticks because there's like a reason that it sticks, right? That like people have an idea of who Hillary Clinton is, which has been like created and massaged, right? And like there's a whole engine designed to do that. So there's that happens before the process. But you hear it, and either you have an idea of Hillary that like she would do something wrong and for whatever reason, or she's dishonest or whatever, or you have an idea that like there's people out to destroy Hillary Clinton. Either whatever perception you walk in with, and it sticks or it doesn't. But I think what it really does, for me personally anyways, it'll firm up my idea of who a candidate is, right? Or it'll cause me to like reject the source of the person who's offering it, like when it comes through social media.
Anybody else want to weigh in on negative stuff? Negative ads?
I mean, as a viewer and consumer, it shuts me down.
Shuts you
So
down to the person attacking or the person being attacked?
It just shuts down that it's not a healthy debate, and it just, negativity, like direct attack to a person's character isn't necessarily that interesting to me. Maybe it's because I have the assumption that perhaps none of them are good people, and that maybe people in general just aren't good. But there's good qualities about everybody, but the highlighting of, I guess maybe it's being an optimist that negativity tends to like make me stand to the side or not engage with it.
I mean, when I was growing up, I remember any election season, there being tons. The television was full of negative attack ads all the time. And it got so overwhelming by the time you get to November that you're ready for the election to be over because you're sick of hearing all the negative campaign ads on TV. So I think since like social media probably isn't going anywhere, at least not anywhere anytime soon, I think politicians know that it pisses people off to hear negative attack ads all the time. But so I don't think that they're inclined to use it as much on social media. At least I don't see like really blatant attacks. And they're not coming directly from the campaigns either. They're coming more from like organizations that are more left-leaning or right-leaning. Those are the ones that are like, oh, look what Trump said today, or oh, look what Hillary said today, and
It depends on who you're targeting.
exactly.
Because if you're a Trump voter, the Trump people understand that a negative ad about Hillary or a negative ad about one of his opponents will weigh in and will have a great impact on reinforcing their support for Trump. They understand that.
And does that have an effect on you? Does it make you not want to look at any of this stuff, or does it make you want to weigh in yourself?
It makes me want to weigh in, but I have a tendency to stay away from it.
From the vitriol?
Yeah.
When you saw Donald Trump call Ted Cruz on Twitter a lot, the biggest liar he's ever met. Now, does that affect you about your view to Trump, or does it affect you about your view to Cruz? I think, Nicholas, you talked a little bit about both. You don't want to deal with it. You don't want to deal with that negativity no matter what.
I think it's hard to ask the question. I mean, it seems like in this room it's hard to ask the question about Republican candidates only because, I mean, I don't really see a huge difference between Trump and Cruz. They both seem pretty scary to me, but I don't trust what either of them say. I mean, when you look at sources that fact check Republican debates, the scores that each candidate gets for truthfulness is pretty awful. So they can attack each other all they want. I'm still probably not very interested in
But isn't that a little
what they have to say.
about like social media? If you say it enough times, someone's going to believe it. Donald Trump's slogan is, "We're going to make America great."
Maybe you only have to say it once.
Of course, repetition, and the way they're flashing news channels and little bits of information on the sides of the screen, wherever you are, it's coming at you. And it's also coming at you subliminally. There's subliminal messages in each message that they put up there. That's why.
We're not talking about social media, the candidates. We're talking about, you're saying the news media is doing that? Subliminal?
All, yeah, the web media, anything on the web, anything they're seeing, it's getting, even if it's printed on the bottom of the television screen and the ads on the side that keep popping up, they pop up in your brain subconsciously. They click switches. They're all designed for this and for this purpose only, for the consumer. And what Nicholas and Saeed had added on is that as conventional and social media mix, the consumer media is in there too, where you're going to read something about a candidate, and then all of a sudden, as you get to the next page, you're getting all of these different things with it. That because you agree with this ad or you're reading it, so you're getting distracted by different things in your mind that you're supposed to retain for the consumer.
I want to return to the negative ad for 1 second, and just to follow up on what you all say. If you had a negative ad, when I was growing up, Lyndon Johnson took out an ad about Barry Goldwater, and it showed a hydrogen bomb, yeah, and going up, and the whole world basically going, there was a baby involved. It was a terrible ad, terrible negative ad. It was very effective, very effective. There was no way we could respond to that. In social media, you say a negative ad, someone says something, you can respond, as we've been saying. Does that make it more effective? Does it make it less effective?
It's almost like Nicholas was saying that, or I think everyone was kind of touched on this, like I don't see a lot of negative ads, from like Bernie Sanders to Hillary and vice versa so I think they kind of leave it up to us, to our discussions, and to do the negative ads on our own. Like, look, we could bash Trump over and over again, right? Or I just think that a lot of it now, it's through conversations or through like certain posts or information about the emails, how it kind of just shaped me. Maybe I bring that up in a conversation. So just through so much social media, we're sharing what we do want to, or sharing like a negative aspect, and it kind of leaves it up to the voters to do like the negative ads, as opposed to the.
I agree. I think it makes it more effective because it's 24 hours a day and it moves so quickly. I think of Max Cleveland, who was a Vietnam veteran, who was triple amputee, and he lost his seat because they said he was unpatriotic. And I think, without social media, without it moving so quickly and being posted 24 hours a day, I think that changes the dynamic.
So it's more damning.
More damning.
Because it can go viral, and no matter what the person says to refute it, it's already out there.
It's already out there.
And what's interesting is probably the most negative candidate in the field from both parties is Donald Trump, and he's also probably got the largest social media presence as well.
I think part of Trump, I think we talk a lot about the negativity. I think it's such an important part of like why he's doing what he's doing. But I think there's another like half of what's going on here with him, which is like that "Make America Great Again" stuff, right? Which is that it's also he creates like this canvas, right? There's something like aspirational, like this canvas for people to project onto him, like whatever that means for them, like for good or ill. In my opinion, probably ill, right? Like what that "great again" means, but. I think that's part of it too, right? Is people who are disenfranchised, people who feel like the system's not for them, who feel like none of these candidates actually are basically all rotten or all crooks, what have you. This whole idea. They hear a guy like him and they think like, wow, and we've heard it like, right? This guy really like says what's on his mind, or he says what we're all thinking, or he says what people are afraid to say. I think that's another half of it too, right? I think it's an interesting form of content too that's like unique to social media, which is like, all right, so there's like the content that's produced by people who make a point about this or that, about how this policy will never work or this candidate's no good. And then people make content incorporating that content, commenting on the original content, right? This sort of, that then gets like spread and then debated in comments. And so it's like you're getting like the second third generation kind of like, Photoshop stuff and videos.
How else to explain, it's not for social media, this phenomenon that Sean's talking about, a billionaire selling himself as a populist. He's doing it on social media, right? Because he's the person that Bernie Sanders is saying is the problem, right? The 100 richest people in the country are worth as much as half the United States population.
You watch him speak, and compared with, say, Rubio or Cruz, he doesn't come across as polished. He stumbles over his words. He kind of like, you can see him sort of, I don't know if you want to call it thinking, but you can see like he's not kind of like saying a rehearsed speech, right? Like he's just kind of like, well, this is what I think, and I'm just kind of like calling it how I see it. People say he's saying what everyone else is thinking.
But did you read his tweets? Did you read his tweets when you were doing it? Did you read his social media?
No, I mean, I've seen his social media. Like, I have been to his Twitter page or whatever. So I think how he's coming across as a populist is that he's like, in his style and his process, he actually is kind of more like an average American than these very polished career politicians. Like, he doesn't look slick when he's speaking. He looks like a bumbling idiot, but like he doesn't have that American political style that I think a lot of people are disenchanted by. I mean, you could probably say the same about Sanders as well.
Yeah.
I think
He's wearing like a $12 suit.
But like
He's like
Sanders
a guy.
almost get,
He's like a guy who is also a senator, and
But-
so people like trust it.
Yeah, but like I still feel like that is I feel like both Sanders and Trump are very conscious of their style, but they've perfected their anti-style style.
Although I feel like Trump's been like preparing for this since the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Like the art of the deal, and like this is a character that he's been sharpening and
Yeah.
polishing, and I'm a guy who gets things done and I take care of things, right? And Sanders, like, sort of in an opposite way, where like he's saying the same thing he's been saying since probably like 1978, right? Like he's the same guy he was. I think people respond to that too.
I think Trump is getting so much attention on social media, and not just his own, like Funny or Die, Reddit, like everyone is sharing these big Trump-esque Saturday Night Live. So even if you don't follow Trump, on social media, something you follow will introduce you to Trump regardless. And sure, it's satire, sure, but it's still, here he is, ladies and gentlemen, and you're saturated by Trump, more so than Bernie, because, sure, you can make fun of Bernie on Saturday Night Live, which happens to all the presidential candidates, but Trump has like such a presence through so many different outlets of social media.
And on conventional media too, I think Trump is getting more coverage on conventional media. With someone who did a study on that.
I think I'd like, in fact, it's like you asked before, like would this, would this primary look the same without social media? Would like Trump look the same without social media? Yeah, but what about the role that traditional media plays as like a megaphone, right? Because like I'm not friends with Donald Trump on Facebook. He's not on my Twitter feed. I wouldn't look at that stuff voluntarily. You know what I mean? But I get it like second, third generation from Facebook's trending now, from a news article on Google News, from like New York Times about the outrageous thing that Donald Trump tweeted last night, like that kind of thing that like, it's this game of follow the leader, right? That like, once everyone on a certain level is like aware of it, then traditional media reports it, and then I all of a sudden am aware of it, right? And it's like, look at this thing that's trending because, and there's like this whole feedback loop that's happening. So I think there's that too, that like traditional media is still definitely playing a role in that regard.
Right, but only in how it feeds the loop of the revolving door of information.
It like broadens the loop out to like people that would not ordinarily be included.
Anything else you guys want? I said we want to keep you past 12:30. It's almost 12:30, so I wanted just to say anything else you want to say because it's we're about to wrap it up. But you guys have been great, and it's I wonder when you're doing your concluding remarks. I wonder if I'm focused on college students, both undergrad and graduate. The new school is a little older, but mostly college students. And I'm wondering whether being college students and being educated in critical thinking or taught to think about critical thinking makes a difference, and whether you guys are more skeptical than the American populace, more educated. Trump's numbers among educated people are going up, so I don't want to admit it may make this argument moot, but I wonder if it's a different philosophy than the general public. You know, and then whatever you want to say lastly, each have to say.
I'm more skeptical of the American populace. Winston Churchill said the greatest argument against democracy is spending 5 minutes with the average voter. So I think critical thought has to be applied to any information that you receive, and I doubt that's happening.
Yeah, I think people have like a knee-jerk belief. I think, you know, it's that question of like, is it apathy or is it like alienation? And I think there's a lot of people out there who think that like this system and the way it works isn't for them and they're not part of it. I don't think they're wrong. I think my skepticism and cynicism is more nuanced maybe, right? And like grounded with more theory. But I don't know that I'm more or less skeptical than like your average voter. I think it just takes a different form.
I think that being in school and having developing critical thinking skills has given me kind of a hyper awareness. I think there's a reductionary view of social media. That the idea that because it's available that we're all there at all times and have access to everything. But social media and online news is still broadcasting, and it's more that I know that I'm seeking to be a part of a certain audience. That I am an audience and there's a broadcaster. There's more broadcasters, but certainly it's not that far of a cry from traditional news sources in the sense of the relationship between information being sent and then received, other than the ability to comment or participate somehow with it. So I think it's important still to be aware that just because Trump's tweeting things doesn't mean that I'm a part of his audience, that there is an audience, and perhaps the political use of social media is to galvanize your audience and your base, that it's not about the opposition. I mean, how many people, I'm not on Trump's Twitter feed writing back, although certainly there are plenty of people that do, but I would suspect that it's a smaller population than the people that actually support him being a part of his audience.
I mean, I think certainly on social media or conventional media, whatever sites you follow, read your friends or institutions, whatever, it's important to keep an objective viewpoint, and I think that comes certainly comes with education. I don't think it's a requirement, but I think that your education certainly plays into how you develop that your own viewpoint and then the ability to remain objective. And it's funny you were saying that there's a rise in educated supporters of Trump, like
Among the people who were voting in the primary.
Yeah, I was thinking on the subway this morning. I was like, I would really like to hear someone with like a high level college degree or like that is respected in any field. Explain to me how Trump makes a viable presidential candidate. Like the undeniable thing about this election is certainly sensational, but I think that so far that's all we've got out of it. Like where the real talk, and where are the real issues? What are the policies? What are we, I would like to hear someone explain that to me in regards to Trump. I don't ever hear it.
Well, we may be hearing more of it if he continues on this little juggernaut he's on.
Well, hopefully.
Lydia?
I guess I feel quite strongly I'm an outsider in this spectacle. It is, to me, a spectacle. I like to think of myself as a critical thinker, so I like to assess the various sources. I'm not even sure that I think that it's possible to get an objective understanding of anything, but particularly around politics and political candidates. The other thing that I think hasn't come up really, but that I wanted to kind of put a spin on it, that I have seen, I generally follow gender issues through social media and through internet, what I read on the internet, and I have been reading a bit about the fact of Hillary Clinton being the first viable female presidential candidate has been like something that I have engaged quite a lot of time into reading about. So I just kind of, as a concluding remark, I wanted to throw that in there.
And yet, that just to play on this for a second before we wrap up, that has been for women, for younger women, that means less than for older women, right? For older women, it seems to be a bigger deal. Younger women, young women your age, they say, you know, look, I don't care about that.
Well, I think
As much.
My understanding is that it's not the primary issue like that a young voter would be concerned about. I mean, in this country, it's like a lot about generational inequality and like income inequality, and a whole lot of identity politics are wrapped up within that. Obviously, gender is a part of that, but I think a lot of young women reject the idea that like someone should be voted for purely on the basis of their gender. I think that speaks to a real second wave feminism that people don't want to accept anymore. There's kind of like an understanding that there's a whole lot of other factors that would play into what would make someone a viable political candidate.
Well, I think you can see each generation in the media, the social media, as where the emailers in the 90s, a little older, and then came the Facebook, a little younger, and then came the Twitter, even younger. So I think they're looking at these marketing to cut across the 320 million and to get a younger generation the information. I got to disagree with the conservative that everybody gets a full view, because when I watch the news at night, and I just pan through several channels at one time, I see Bernie Sanders smiling and Hillary Clinton slumped over like this. So, I mean, each state, every station in conventional, they have an opinion and they will say it, and they will sway it according to the money. And that's where it comes in, Donald Trump with business and the money. The United States government is only hiring now people with Bachelor of Science or a BA in management, which I think is going to be a Bachelor of Science. And it's the same thing for the officers, and it's the same thing that they're hiring through the IRS. Everybody has to have a business degree to work in the government now. Nobody goes without it. And what you don't see about these people are actually, which they took out of it, are their personal habits or lack of personal habits. And the smear campaigns, when they came in the 60s, they were actually illegal. It was illegal to fight or to accuse someone of something that would cause confusion. It was illegal. I think it was 68 or 72, somewhere in there somewhere, that they stopped it. And now they all attack each other. And I agree that when I saw those ads years ago, I was like, oh my God, this one did this and this one did, why do I want to vote for any of them? And I guarantee you that's what happened. People said, I'm not voting for any of them, just like the last year with Bloomberg here. We got over 8 million citizens. 1.4 million voted. 1.4 million. I mean, people know. Money.
People were disenchanted, that's why.
Definitely.
No question.
Yeah, sure.
Rebecca?
I don't really have a lot of closing remarks other than just, you know, the people that you're interviewing here aren't really representative of all of America, and I think that's really important to consider, which I'm sure you are. As far as social media, I think a lot of, I hate to say middle America, but people who aren't in college or have ever gone to college, maybe they put a lot more trust in their social media and the sources of their news, as opposed to like the critical thinkers. And not to say that they aren't critical
You were
thinkers.
like critical thinkers, you were saying.
Yeah, because they could too be critical thinkers. That's all.
Yes, they can be. And there's no question about that. That's a very good point. But I do think that you all have this fairly interesting, healthy distrust of some of the social media. Just like you do the conventional media. Although I will say, and we can wrap it up, I think we're done with the taping. I will say, as a member of the conventional media and television, we do not look for Hillary Clinton slumping like that.
I've seen
to slump like that.
I've seen a few. If you want me to point them out.
No, but it's maybe because that's
like
the way
and
she
after
is
witness.
posturing. You know, that's her physical posture.
They have a million pictures to put on. Why couldn't they put a smile on Bernie?
Right,
next
but
to it?
we don't look at it like, I promise, we don't look at it like that. We just don't look at it. I want to get a picture of Bernie smiling and a picture of Hillary looking like this. I think that Ahad said it really well. He said, she is unspectacularly solid. And I think that's, you know, that's the debate in the Democratic Party, right? We shut down, I think we're done. That's the debate within the, yeah, we're done. That's the debate in the Democratic